welcome to Telesur. I'm Carla Gonzalez. This is Interviews from Quito, the program where we explore the big challenges facing this country and the region. In today's program, we look at the recent victories by Ecuadorian athletes around the world. The first win at the Giro d'Italia in cycling, gold medals in athletics and in the Pan American BMX Championship. But many of these achievements were done thanks to private sponsors and through the support of other countries. And many athletes have denounced a lack of support by the government. So what can be done to change this reality? For that, we have sports manager Gustavo Illingworth. But first, let's take a look at this video.
Ecuadorian athletes have succeeded in different international competitions during the last days. Richard Carapaz won the Giro d'Italia, one of the greatest cycling championships in the world. Glenda Morejon won the Spanish leg of the women's IAAF race walking challenge. Both of them did it with the support of private companies and their own effort. However, Ecuador's government and society prioritized news and support on football, even though this sport has not been as successful as others at an international level. What do Ecuadorian athletes need to do in order to gain more importance in media and public opinion? Follow our analysis.
So thank you, Gustavo, for being with us. So can you explain to us what does this surge in sports achievement mean for a country like Ecuador, so small but yet so eager to have all these historical achievements in sports?
These achievements that have been seen these last days have been the culmination of long processes of the sports people in our country. I think that what impacts us now is the speed of things happening. Some years ago, we had sporadic achievements. We had like Pancho Segura, Andrés Gómez, Nicolás Lapenti, Jefferson Pérez. And now, these achievements have been seen in the same magnitude but in less time. So I think that there are two parts to this. One, Ecuador has a diamond to be discovered, a natural resource to be discovered. We have won in different fields, not only football. Our athletes have always been very good. Our tennis players have been great. I think that this raw resource that we have in the Ecuadorian sportsmen have been nurtured from the sponsorship of private companies and the help of the state. These two parts have come together to help all of the athletes. If we see who have been those who have won, and just in the last months, or just last week, we see that we've got the sub-20 soccer team, which is a private initiative, sponsored by private companies. We have Alfredo Campo, who has just finished second in the BMX Championship in Holland, and he was fifth in Manchester and second once again in France. He's got a dual sponsorship. He's got the private companies that help his career, and at the same time, he's got the BMX Federation that help him as a high-level athlete. Just like Glenda Morejon, she's a girl from... She's 19 years old, and for me, she's a superhero. Her capacity is incredible as a person, as an athlete. She receives some support from the ministry as a high-level athlete of $541 a month. And at the same time, she receives private donations of Nike and IFE that triple that value. Just with one or with the other, nothing would be possible. There has to be a joint effort. So the money can come in.
About the current and the continuous rejection towards these talks that have been going on for a while in Ecuador, that the athletes here in Ecuador, or whoever manages the sports in Ecuador, are not receiving enough pay. That we see cases, for example, athletes going to competitions and not having enough money to pay their tickets for the flights, or not being able to have wear like the shorts or shoes or anything that they need for that competition. What has been going on that is wrong?
Okay, the problem is easy. It is easy to see it and hard to solve. The government, the Ecuadorian government, has an important amount of money destined for sports. The thing is the middleman. The bureaucracy in sport is very high. So the money comes out of the source of the government and it goes to the Secretary of Sports, then it goes to the athletes. Just one part, which for the athletes of high level. But there's another part that stays in all of the federations, and that's where the problem begins. Just not with saying any name in particular, but the problem is in how we process all of this money. It might sound like it's an exaggeration, but for every dollar that goes into a federation, athletes receive 20 cents. So there's no work in each process, and many times the athletes have to pay their own for themselves everything the government can't pay for. Likewise, this is where the private companies make a difference. When an athlete receives money or money from the government, they have to be able to prove all of their expenditures, food, hotels, anything. So the government can also justify those outcomes. When the private company helps, they just help in exchange for the image. So they tell the athletes, I want your image, and this is how much we can give you a year. So do whatever you feel is necessary. So the negotiation between privates and the athletes is easy, but the government negotiation goes through many steps.
But then, are we then talking about an idea of not having the state intervene at all or help at all? Because we've seen reports recently that the government is proposing to close some of these hard training or specialized training centers that support the athletes in Ecuador.
In part, yes. These centers of high performance developed by the government could be privatized and live from the money they can have. They can be centers for private companies or for other disciplines. But in general, yes, because if the government wants to help, although it's not their obligation, they want to reach the athlete, they can help the athlete directly. They can give the athlete the money directly. Let's eliminate taxes to all of these people, so they won't have to pay any taxes to the government. What else can we do? We can tell the companies, maybe if you help sports, help us with 25% of the tax you pay. And how could that be? How could they do that? They choose a sport and they support it. These are ways the government can foster the practice of a sport without having all of the middlemen. I think that this is the cause of the problem of the government help. That it always begins with a good intention,
So instead
but
of saying
making operational doesn't work.
high performance centers for athletes, it should be let's work together on making it a rentable a system that actually works, a company that actually works.
Exactly. We can't depend solely on the government support. It's not reasonable to ask for this.
Happened for the last years.
Well, in part because of the lack of incentives to the private companies. And let's see this from the private standpoint. The companies are not, their main goal is not to give the money to the athlete. Their goal is to be able to tell a story through this athlete. Let's see, for example, the most recent example with Richard Carapaz and Movistar. It has been incredible. We had the whole city yesterday of Quito painted of pink. And at the same time, you saw Movistar everywhere.
Yeah, Movistar has done an amazing campaign with Richard Carapaz winning for Ecuador. And the issue is that Richard Carapaz said it himself. I was speaking to the government, I was speaking to the state, and they weren't listening to me when I was asking that I needed help to become the sportsman that I am now.
And that's the reason why government can help, but it should not be obligated to help. If the government wants to help somebody, they can. But let's see the case of Richard and other athletes. Now we have kids of 17 to 20 years that are in the lower stages of contribution of the government, and they receive like $550 a month. And how does it work? That when they reach better achievements, they can have more money. I'm asking you, what comes first? The economic help or the success? If you're an athlete and you have to succeed, you have to survive with $600 a month to train like an elite athlete, is it going to be easy or hard to achieve any goal? Let's see all of the cases that have made it. They really make it with very little money. But we can't ask the government more because that's all they have. The example is Movistar with Richard. Movistar saw in Richard a potential, and they decided to bet on him. They didn't know that Richard was going to win the Giro 3 or 4 years ago. They saw a guy that had capacity physically and mentally. So they bet on him. And they sowed him for 3 or 4 years that are now giving their fruits.
Can we also maybe discuss not just the support of the private and the public companies or public institutions, but also the support of the people? We see more people now are excited and interested in getting to know what cycling is about, for example, or knowing what BMX is, or running, or things that were not very common before, because before you mentioned it, before we only used to have support and interest for football, for soccer. But now, can we see maybe a change of mind in the society as well?
It's a process, and it comes, and this is thanks to the athletes. When there's an athlete like Richard that has success, people are interested in cycling. And then it comes from an interest of the public to learn more about the sport and practice the sport. And this will later be reflected on how the news media will need to report on these sports. And once the news media give them space and time, not through obligation, but because people are asking for it, then private companies say that this is a space where people want to consume their products. Some years ago, Ecuador had a baseball league that worked fairly well. They had a basketball league, and people used to go to the stadium to see basketball. And they went to watch baseball, and it was and little by little the interest was lost. Maybe because space in the news media, maybe because soccer became prominent, and the clubs began to have success internationally. So people had to decide what to do this week. Should I watch baseball, basket, or soccer? And at that point, they decided to go for soccer. Now we're opening this array of sports once more. Soccer is still the king, but every time we see that public is interested in their athletes and the stories of success behind them, and these stories of how to overcome their daily difficulties to attain international goals. And at the end of the day, successes like the one of Daisy da Gómez, Alfredo Campos.
And these have been going on for years now. We see athletes that are competing 3 or 4 Olympics before this ones.
Así es.
It's this is so. Today we have a golden generation of athletes. Now we have multiple international champions that have competed with the best athletes sub-20, and they have been able to win. And this is something we've had before. The thing is that when they go to the Olympiads, the level of training is much bigger. The need for rest is much higher too. So the Olympic athletes, the professional ones, they eat, they train, they eat, they train, they eat, they train. That's everything they do. Our athletes eat, train, and they find a job to pay their bills. So they don't rest enough. They don't train as much as they need to be able to compete in an elite level. That's where companies such as ours is making a difference to help these kids to get private support, that believe in their sport, that believe in their project, and they want to tell the story of success or of defeat. But the story itself is marvelous of how to overcome difficulties. We're here to help when they need a ticket, an airfare ticket, or when they need to get a visa, or when they need help with their taxes. We're trying to offer a 360 service, so they will only be worried of their sport.
So what would you say is needed to improve this, to strengthen this relationship and promote more Ecuadorian athletes to make it into international competitions?
The first and foremost is that all these kids still get the support of the government. That's very important, because that gives them a ground. It's like saying, okay, whatever happens, you have this amount of money. And the second, to give this leap, is that the government finally gives the private companies a stimulus, so it will be worth supporting sports. All of the success cases that we've mentioned today have been through the support of both public and private. When Andrés Gómez was a star, he began with a public support, but without the private support, he wouldn't have been able to get so far. The case of Jefferson Perez, of course, without the public support, he would not have been able to begin to win any competitions. But then the real leap in his quality of life was when the private company believed in him and began to support him economically. And that allowed him to live better. Because it's not only a fact that the athletes compete. These kids deserve a better lifestyle. They deserve to earn better, not just merely what they need to live day to day, but to live good. Many times they have to travel, and once they're there, they can't have fun. They can't see anything around. Who wants just a life, just a sacrifice that's merely sacrifice? The private sector is the only one that can achieve this, that these kids have a better life. And it's not only sacrifice, that they train and they have sacrifice, but they also enjoy their lives. And that's what
Indeed, we have to create
this is what we want.
Synergy between public and the private sector to promote Ecuadorian athletes making it in the future as well. Thank you very much, Gustavo. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, muchas gracias a ti por tu tiempo.
Thank you very much for your time.
Talking to Gustavo Illingworth, the sports manager, on what Ecuadorian athletes need from the public and the private sector as well to succeed in international competitions. Thank you for watching. This is Interviews from Quito. I'm Carla Gonzalez. Until next time.